On a cold November morning in 1969, an 8-year-old girl with red hair and freckles stood outside a new hamburger restaurant in Columbus, Ohio. Her smiling face appeared on the sign. Her nickname appeared above the door. Wendy's. People would soon recognize that little girl around the world. But the real story did not begin with Wendy. It began many years earlier, with a lonely boy who moved from town to town, rarely felt that he belonged anywhere, and found comfort in watching families eat together. That boy was Dave Thomas. He would eventually build one of America's most famous restaurant chains. But his greatest achievement was not the number of hamburgers he sold. It was what he did for children who, like him, were still waiting to feel that they belonged somewhere. This is the remarkable story of the boy behind Wendy's. Dave Thomas was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey, on July 2, 1932. When he was only 6 weeks old, Rex and Auleva Thomas adopted him. For the first few years of his life, Dave had a mother, a father, and a home. But when Dave was 5, Auleva died. Her death changed everything. Dave's father struggled to find steady employment. The two began moving from one place to another as Rex searched for work. For many children, home is a familiar bedroom, a neighborhood, and friends who grow up beside them. For Dave, home was temporary. A rented room. A trailer. A boarding house. Another town whose name he would soon have to forget. Every time he began getting comfortable, it seemed that another move was waiting. Dave's father was a hard-working man, but he was not emotionally close to his son. He had little time or energy left for tenderness. The quiet distance between them made Dave feel even more alone. However, there was one place where father and son occasionally sat together, a restaurant. They did not always talk very much. But when Dave ate a hamburger beside his father, he had his attention for a little while. Dave also watched the other tables. He saw parents laughing with their children. He saw people passing food to one another. He heard conversation, clinking dishes, and the sound of families sharing their day. To most customers, it was simply dinner. To Dave, it looked like belonging. Without realizing it, the lonely boy had discovered the idea that would guide his entire life. A restaurant could be more than a place to buy food. It could make people feel welcome. The most stable person in Dave's early life was his grandmother, Minnie Sinclair. Dave spent some of his happiest childhood summers with her in Michigan. Minnie taught him that people should be treated with dignity, that work should be done properly, and that feeling sorry for yourself would not solve your problems. She did not give Dave wealth. She gave him something more valuable: standards. Do the right thing, even when nobody is watching. Treat people with respect, regardless of their position. Never believe that honest work is beneath you. Those lessons remained with Dave long after childhood. Years later, when he became wealthy and famous, he still believed that a restaurant owner should be willing to clean a table, sweep a floor, or speak kindly to an employee. His grandmother had planted the foundation of his future business before Dave even knew what kind of business he would build. Dave began working while he was still very young. He delivered newspapers. He carried golf clubs. He set bowling pins. He worked at a gas station. Some jobs lasted only briefly. At one point, he lost a job because he was too young to be legally employed. His father became angry and accused Dave of being unable to keep a job. Those words wounded him. Dave was still a child, but he made a private decision. He would prove that he was not useless, unreliable, or destined to become a burden. Around the age of 12, he found work at the Regus restaurant in Knoxville, Tennessee. The owners treated him with encouragement and made him feel that effort mattered more than background. For a boy who had spent years feeling unwanted and unsettled, that kindness was powerful. A restaurant was once again giving Dave something he could not easily find at home, a place in which he mattered. At 15, after another family move, Dave began working at the Hobby House restaurant in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He started as a busboy. But he did not want to learn only one job. He worked at the fountain. He learned the kitchen. He studied how food was prepared, how customers were served, and how a restaurant survived a busy day. Dave believed that if he wanted to own a restaurant one day, he needed to understand every task inside it. The owner, Phil Claus, noticed his determination and became one of his most important mentors. When Dave's father prepared to move again, Dave faced a painful decision. He could continue following a life that never stayed in one place. Or he could remain in Fort Wayne and build something for himself. At only 15 years old, Dave chose to stay. He left school, rented a room and worked long hours at the hobby house. While other teenagers were attending classes, playing sports and returning home to their families, Dave was supporting himself. He was growing up too quickly. But inside him, one childhood dream remained alive. Someday, he would own a restaurant of his own. In the early 1950s, during the Korean War era, Dave joined the United States Army. He attended the Army's Cook and Baker's School at Fort Benning, Georgia. He was later stationed in Germany, where he became one of the youngest soldiers to manage an enlisted men's club. The Army taught Dave how to prepare food for large numbers of people. It also taught him discipline, organization, and responsibility. A mistake in a home kitchen might spoil one dinner. A mistake while feeding hundreds of soldiers could become a much larger problem. Dave learned how to plan, supervise workers, and maintain standards under pressure. When his military service ended in 1953, he returned to the hobby house. There, he met a waitress named Lorraine Buskirk. They married in 1954 and eventually had 5 children: Pam, Ken, Laurie, Molly, and Melinda. For the boy who had grown up without stability, becoming a husband and father carried special meaning. He was no longer watching other families from a restaurant table. He finally had a family of his own. But now he also had greater responsibility. 5 children needed food, clothes, security, and a father who would not disappear from their lives. Dave's dream of owning a restaurant was no longer only about personal success. It was about giving his family the stability he had never experienced. In 1962, Dave was given an opportunity that looked more like a disaster. Phil Claus had become involved with Kentucky Fried Chicken, a known for struggling KFC restaurants in Columbus, Ohio. The restaurants were performing poorly. Their operations were confused. The menu was too complicated. Customers were not responding. Even Colonel Harlan Sanders reportedly believed that rescuing them would be extremely difficult. Dave was married and raising a large family. Failure could cost him years of work and the security he was trying to build. But Dave saw something others did not. A failing business was not always a bad business. Sometimes it was a good idea hidden beneath bad decisions. He accepted the challenge. When Dave arrived, he did not begin by pretending that everything was fine. He watched. He listened. He studied what customers ordered and what they ignored. Then he simplified the menu so employees could prepare food more consistently. He improved the restaurant signs and promoted the chicken more creatively. He focused attention on the product people actually wanted. The turnaround did not happen in a single dramatic night. It required years of correcting small problems, training people, and refusing to surrender. Slowly, the restaurants recovered. The operation that others had considered nearly hopeless became successful. Dave eventually gained ownership of the restaurants and later sold his KFC interest. The experience gave him money, but it also gave him something even more important. It taught him how to recognize unnecessary complexity. It taught him that customers valued consistency. And it taught him that when everyone says an idea cannot succeed, they may simply be describing what they themselves are afraid to attempt. Even after succeeding with KFC, Dave continued thinking about hamburgers. He visited hamburger stands wherever he traveled. He studied the meat. He examined the buns. He observed the speed of service. He thought about what restaurants were doing well and what they had stopped caring about. Fast food was expanding across America, but Dave believed that speed should not require sacrificing quality. He imagined a simple restaurant serving fresh hamburgers made to order. Customers would be able to choose their toppings. The menu would not be crowded with dozens of confusing items. The food would be familiar, but it would feel more carefully prepared. Dave discussed the idea repeatedly with his friend Len Imker. Eventually, Len challenged him to stop talking and start building. Downtown Columbus had office workers looking for lunch, but good hamburger choices were limited. Len had access to a building at 257 East Broad Street. The opportunity was directly in front of Dave. But opening another hamburger restaurant was a serious risk. McDonald's was already expanding. Burger King was growing. Other chains had more money, more locations, and greater public recognition. Many people believed America did not need another hamburger chain. Dave disagreed. He did not believe he needed to defeat every competitor immediately. He only needed to give customers one clear reason to choose his restaurant. Quality. Dave considered naming the restaurant after one of his children. He eventually chose the nickname of his youngest daughter, Melinda. Her siblings had struggled to pronounce Melinda. They called her Wenda, and that gradually became Wendy. Dave imagined a smiling, red-haired girl representing an old-fashioned and friendly restaurant. The image suggested warmth, innocence, and family. On November 15, 1969, the first Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers opened in Columbus, Ohio. The original menu was remarkably focused. Hamburgers, chili, French fries, soft drinks, and the frosty dessert. The hamburgers were square. That shape helped the meat extend beyond the round bun, allowing customers to see that they were receiving a substantial patty. The square shape later became connected with a message that Wendy's did not cut corners. The restaurant also used fresh beef and allowed customers to choose how their hamburgers were prepared. This created more work than simply handing everyone the same sandwich. But Dave believed customers could recognize when a business respected their preferences. The first Wendy's became profitable quickly. The boy who had once eaten hamburgers in roadside restaurants because they gave him a brief feeling of family now owned a hamburger restaurant carrying his daughter's name. But the success was only beginning. Dave understood that customers wanted quality, but they also wanted convenience. In 1970, Wendy's developed its pick-up window concept at a freestanding restaurant. Drive-through service existed in different forms before Wendy's, but the company helped develop the modern system in which customers ordered through a speaker and collected food from a window. At the time, the idea was unfamiliar enough that customers needed instructions explaining how to use it. The window seemed like a small addition to a building. Instead, it helped transform the business. People could purchase dinner without leaving their cars. Parents traveling with children did not have to bring the entire family inside. Workers could get food quickly and continue their journey. Convenience helped Wendy's expand from a local restaurant into a growing chain. Dave began franchising the concept in 1973. Instead of granting only one restaurant at a time, Wendy's sometimes awarded franchise rights covering larger territories. This helped the company grow rapidly. In March 1978, Wendy's opened its 1,000th restaurant, only 100 months after the first location opened. The man who had once struggled to find a permanent address was now placing his restaurant name across America. Dave became a millionaire and a respected businessman. But success did not make him pretend that every decision in his life had been correct. One regret followed him for decades. He had dropped out of high school. As Dave became famous, schools invited him to speak to students. He encouraged young people to complete their education. But some students recognized the contradiction. How could a high school dropout lecture them about staying in school? Dave could have ignored the criticism. He could have said that wealth proved he did not need a diploma. Instead, he admitted that leaving school had been a mistake. Approximately 45 years after dropping out, Dave returned to complete his high school equivalency requirements. In 1993, he received his GED. He reportedly attended a high school graduation ceremony and was voted most likely to succeed. The moment contained an important lesson. Success does not mean defending every choice you ever made. Sometimes success means becoming humble enough to correct an old mistake. In 1989, Dave began appearing in Wendy's television commercials. He did not look like a polished Hollywood actor. That was exactly why people liked him. He appeared ordinary, sincere, and approachable. He spoke like the owner of a neighborhood restaurant rather than the leader of a large corporation. Over the years, Dave appeared in more than 800 commercials. Millions of Americans came to recognize his face. The child who had once felt invisible had become one of the most recognizable business figures in the country. But Dave eventually used that recognition for something far more important than selling hamburgers. He began speaking for children who were still waiting to be seen. Dave never forgot that he had been adopted. He understood that his life could have been very different without adults who gave him opportunities, guidance, and occasional stability. In 1990, President George H.W. Bush invited Dave to become a spokesperson for a national adoption awareness initiative. Dave accepted. But he did not want to participate only in ceremonies or appear in photographs. He wanted to reduce the obstacles preventing children in foster care from joining permanent families. In 1992, he established the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. He spoke publicly about adoption. He testified before Congress. He supported efforts to make adoption more affordable. He used his business connections, public fame, and personal story to remind America that older children and children with difficult histories still deserved permanent homes. Dave understood something that could not be measured by restaurant sales. A child can receive food, clothing, and temporary shelter and still ache for a place where somebody will say, "You are ours. You are not leaving again." For Dave, this was not an abstract cause. It was connected to the loneliness of his own childhood. He had built a restaurant around the image of a smiling family. Now he wanted real children to experience the security that image represented. The foundation later created Wendy's Wonderful Kids, a program that supports adoption professionals focused on finding permanent families for children who have waited the longest in foster care. By 2025, the program had celebrated more than 15,000 adoptions. A hamburger business had helped finance something no restaurant menu could describe. The moment a child finally stopped waiting for a family. Dave Thomas died in January 2002 at the age of 69. By then, Wendy's had grown into an international company. At the end of 2025, the company reported 7,397 restaurants around the world. But numbers do not fully explain Dave Thomas's life. His story was not simply about a poor child becoming rich. It was about a child who spent years searching for permanence. He found mentors in restaurant owners who treated him with dignity. He created stability for his wife and 5 children. He placed his daughter's name on a restaurant built around friendliness and quality. And after becoming successful, he turned back toward children whose lives were still uncertain. The little red-haired girl on the Wendy's sign represented his daughter. But behind that sign was also the memory of another child. A boy sitting quietly in a restaurant. A boy watching families laugh over dinner. A boy wondering what it would feel like to belong. Perhaps that is why Dave Thomas understood that people do not live on food alone. They also need encouragement. They need dignity. They need someone who believes they are worth keeping. Dave built restaurants because food had once made him feel close to a family. But his greater legacy was helping thousands of children find families of their own. And that is the true story behind Wendy's. Sometimes the deepest pain in our childhood becomes the purpose of our adult life. Dave Thomas could not change the loneliness he experienced as a boy. But he used that loneliness to build welcoming places, support his own family, and create hope for children who are still waiting for a permanent home. His story reminds us that our beginning does not have to decide our ending. A person can be abandoned, unsettled, or underestimated, and still build something that gives other people a sense of belonging. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes that difficult beginnings can still lead to meaningful lives. Subscribe to Stories of Life for more true stories of struggle, courage, and second chances.